We're going to move on now. Now, somebody who's been at the forefront of the battle of challenging the British government's implicit racism that has been foisted upon the Windrush generation has been my sister here, Jacqueline McKenzie from Lee Day. Not only was she, this is before she was at Lee Day, her own firm, that we, at the time of the Windrush broke into the news, we were working together to bring the heat to government. And while she did her thing in Parliament, I blocked off number 10 Downing Street so Boris Johnson couldn't get into his office. He was late for a cabinet meeting. He was absolutely furious and berated the commissioner at the time. But I was happy to block off the High Street, block off Westminster, block off number 10 Downing Street, because sometimes you need to make sure that they understand we got real power. Are you with me on that point? And I'll tell you something else as well. Some young people at the back there, about a year ago, they were walking around Brixton giving out leaflets saying, please come to this climate change meeting because climate change is affecting Africa and the Caribbean. 3 people turned up to that meeting way back in a year, right? When you saw people spraying things orange and blocking your road to go to wherever it is you were going in town, you might think they were just being their silly little pranks. But actually, people are aware that if the climate continues to worsen, then the primary victims are going to be the Caribbean and Africa. So climate change has to be adopted as a priority for us. We need to reduce the temperature, we need to save the planet, and we need to save our people as well. Are you with me on that point? Yeah, thank you. All right, we're going to move straight along. And Jacqueline McKenzie, as I say, is a good friend. She's done fantastic work. Please give her a warm round of applause.
Good evening, everybody. So, Lee, thank you so much for putting this together. And it does remind me of those early days of the Windrush scandal, particularly March and April 2018, when myself and Lee and David and a handful of people were trying to hold this together because thousands of people were congregating on the BCA in Brixton. And there was a call out for lawyers. And when the lawyers realized they weren't going to get paid, nobody came. And so that's how, by complete accident, I became central to or associated with the Windrush scandal in such a big way, because I seem to be one of the few that was prepared to work for free. And yeah, that was a mighty struggle in those early days. It's still... It's still an ongoing struggle. We're nowhere by any means out of the woods yet with it. Some of that work that we did in the early days, like blocking Westminster Bridge and Downing Street, and the sort of thing that has made me an absolute enemy of the state, so that they prepare little dossiers on me going back to 40 years of political activism and their stupidity. We probably need a little bit more of that. But I've been asked, you've heard all these really interesting talks so far from everybody about climate justice and long-term development and so forth. And sadly, I've got a really boring thing to tell you, and that's about immigration. So just to say, some of you here, because I'm seeing lots of faces of people here who I know, mainly from my work on Grenada, because I lived in Grenada during the revolution. And so I've been very involved with the human rights work there. We set up the Committee for Human Rights in Grenada, and we fought the Americans, and in fact we had permanent demonstrations outside the US Embassy, and so on. And so I'm mostly known for that alongside Windrush, but I am half Jamaican. And in fact, my late father made sure that we knew Jamaica. We went there regularly. As children, I've been as an adult many times, and we are from that whole southwestern corridor of those parishes that are mostly affected, Manchester and St Elizabeth and St James, particularly St James, my partner. So my heart and my spirit's there, and we're very affected. A lot of it, thankfully, is property damage, which we will recover from. In Grenada, we've had some terrible hurricanes, and we always say we will build back better. And Jamaica will definitely build back better. I have no doubt about that. And the resilience that we've seen this past week echoes the resilience that we saw in our ancestors, and someone said, you know, they lived so that we could be here. But also, if we think of contemporary times, the resilience we saw with those victims of the Windrush scandal, when the whole state turned on them in the most toxic of way to deny them opportunities, even healthcare. Remember that very first case, which was actually in the press before the scandal became publicly known in April 2018. This case was in the press in November 2017 of a man who was denied cancer treatment because he couldn't prove his status in the UK. So we've been through the struggles, and we have the resilience, and we will come through this one as well. And we gather here in the spirit of those brilliant and resilient ancestors. But I've been asked to say something about immigration. So 2 things about that. Firstly, and I don't suspect there's going to be a lot of people, because it's not a sort of time of year when your families come up for holidays, although Jamaicans find themselves all over the place all the time, don't they? I was really quite shocked when, was it Ukraine, when we found out there were some Jamaicans stuck there? What were they doing there? So Jamaicans have a way of finding themselves all over the place. But the main group tend to come during this, kids come up during the summer holidays, and that period's gone. They would have gone back to school, and lots of people send for their families to come over at Christmas. So I don't know to what extent there are lots of Jamaicans here on holidays, and I'm talking about the ones that intended to go back. I'm not talking about those who didn't intend to go back, because quite a few of them. But if you know of people, because there are meant to be initiatives. Now, normally when you're here, because sadly Jamaica's just one of 2 Caribbean islands where you do have to you have to come with a visa. Most of the Caribbean, you can come here without a visa for up to 6 months. But Jamaica and Trinidad and Tobago was only just recently added. It used to be Guyana and Jamaica, and Guyana was taken off when they discovered oil. So that's the way to go. Maybe when they're digging up the roads in Jamaica, if you find any oil, they might remove the visa requirement. But at the moment, they need visas. So if people are here, there ought to be initiatives, and the Home Office ought to announce it, but they won't. It's one of the reasons why there are visas for Jamaicans, is that the Home Office and the British state generally do not like Jamaican visitors. Now, they've coined that around this whole crazy narrative about the Yardies that came over with the drugs and so on in the early 2000s and mid-2000s. Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a false narrative, this. Of course, every society generates drug dealers, and often governments are complicit with them. But that's a separate thing. But if there are people here, there ought to be an initiative from the Home Office to allow people to extend their stay. This is an exceptional circumstance, and that's usually the requirement. Is there an exceptional circumstance? And there is one. They will have to contact the Home Office. They will have to complete a form. It's called FLRIR. It's all online, and it should all be straightforward. And because Jamaica has been designated as being crisis hit, it should really be straightforward. So if you do happen to have an auntie or a cousin who came over, you can tell them that. I can easily be found if you need a chat or any advice about it. But that's one aspect of the immigration story. The other aspect of it is, what is this British government going to do to airlift some Jamaicans here, particularly children at school? There ought to be some sort of initiative, as we saw with Ukraine, and we've seen with other countries. There are bits of Jamaica, and we really love our High Commissioner, and it's all great that he talked up everything that's happening. But I think David, who sat next to me, when someone said it's going to take weeks and months, he said generations, and this is true. And when you look at some of the schools in St. Elizabeth, they are just not going to be viable. I mean, children are going to lose so much schooling. So we need to put some pressure on the British government. They've done this before, where they've said, are you prepared? Are people, there was money for it if you were prepared to take in a Ukrainian family. And what is there for Jamaica? All right, Jamaica still has the king as its head of state. It shouldn't have, but it has. So what are they going to do? And I think what you can do is to contact your local MPs. It's a shame, I think the 2 MPs who are here have gone. But certainly with Belle, anyway, I don't know the other one very well, but with Belle, she's going to be all over this. But if you've got an MP, I'm sure you're not all from round here, if you've come in, and contact your MP, bombard them with information. What are they going to do? Is there going to be a scheme for Jamaicans, and it can be quota or quoted, there could be a quota of it, a number of families to be allowed to come over, and particularly children who are not going to be able to go to school for a very, very long time. We all know when our kids miss a day school, the trouble we get into, and rightly so, because, missing even a day's education can be problematic. So you need to put pressure on, and if you've got family, tell them they can stay, but they must contact the Home Office or an immigration lawyer or even the CAB or the various charities that are up and down the country to extend their stay. And I just want to just say 2 very quick things. I'm sure my time is up. What this has told me, listening to all the discussions about climate justice and, debt forgiveness and all these and reparations and all of this is relevant. But what strikes me, Grenada gets hit by a hurricane, because I lived there as a teenager, I kind of have a lot of affinity there, I have a house there and that sort of thing, but Jamaica's in my blood. But I have a lot of experience of hurricanes in Grenada, sorry. And every time there's a hurricane, we gather like this. And the barrels are done, and and we get a lot of rubbish. I'm glad to hear that you said no clothes and no shoes, because my office was once a receiving point for stuff for a hurricane in Dominica. We had to get the Salvation Army to come and collect it to dump it. The amount of rubbish that people give you, they want to clear out their old junk. So, but what this has said to me, we haven't got time to discuss it, but we do need a meeting on this, is how are we, because we heard about the Red Cross, and these organisations are problematic. How are we going to prepare ourselves? Where's our development agencies? Where's our real structure so that we're ready whenever we have these issues in our countries? There is an agency with staff that's run by our people that's ready to go. Because with climate justice, these hurricanes are now going to be a much more regular thing, and we're going to build back, and we're going to build back better, but it's going to be smashed again, because that's the reality of the times we're in. And my final point, Lee, sorry to overindulge, is just to tell you, and I've spoken to Paulette from Jamaica National about an event that we want to do next February, but we've decided to make it a little bit more exciting. So from the 7th to the 14th of February, and Leanne, who's here, knows all about it. In fact, we're going to try and put her in charge of it, but she doesn't know that yet. We're going to do a Jamaica love, a kind of Jamaica loving. And we're going to try and get the whole country involved in this, schools and churches. So you have Macmillan Cancer Week, and everybody does a coffee morning, you invite your friends in. And we have a goal of trying to raise £1 million. And we don't know where it will go, but somebody will need to tell us. And maybe through Jamaica National, because we thought we'll come on there on the 14th, which is Valentine's Day. So rather go spend money on some extortionate rose that dies the next day, or pay double the price for a meal in a restaurant where they try to kick you out after an hour because it's on rotation, isn't it? They want to cram in as many people. We're going to love Jamaica on Valentine's Day, but the week leading up to it is going to be a series of activities. We tried to create a website today called Me Love Jamaica, and it's because of that song. We tried to buy the rights of it, but somebody's already got that. So we've got to find a nice phrase, but everyone is going to have to dip into, every single Jamaican in the country, and non-Jamaican, has to be part of We Love Jamaica. February the 7th to February the 14th next year. So just remember that, and do look out for the publicity. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I just give you the QR codes again? Because these are the QR codes that you need to put on your phone so you can sign the letter to the Prime Minister. Because let's be clear, when you're talking about 1 million Jamaicans being affected, right? We can do so much with barrels and so on, but this needs proper multi-million pound action. And Britain has got a responsibility to make sure that they provide some reparation for all that they've taken. So scan the code online. I know people online are asking for it, which is why I've just taken it there. I'll bring it out again later on.